Hello guys, so today we'll be talking about the concept of prototypal inheritance in JavaScript. Alright, but I would like to approach it from the angle of humans. So I'm a human, I have a child, and my child has a child, okay? In the context of human relationship, I will be the grandparent to my grandchild, and then I'll be the parent to my child. So in the context of humans, there's a concept known as heredity. It has to do with children inheriting traits from their parent or their ancestor. When I say their ancestor, anybody up the chain, parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, and stuff like that. Now, these traits are coded in our DNA. So there's the human, and the human has a DNA. When the human gives birth to a child, the child is likely to inherit from the DNA of the parent. So the child is likely to inherit some traits from the DNA of the parent. All right, this is the concept of inheritance. All right, in the context of this video. Okay, so we have a parent. The parent has a child, and that child has another child. This child can inherit from its direct parent or any parent up the chain. Okay, so I'm going to refer to those other parents as ancestors. Now, this is human inheritance. Now, if we come to JavaScript, the way it works is that every value in JavaScript is created by a constructor. Whether you see it happening or not, implicitly or explicitly, every value in JavaScript is created by a constructor. The constructor is the parent. The value is the child. Prototype is the DNA of the constructor. All right, so when a parent constructor gives birth to a child constructor, the child constructor's prototype inherits some traits from the parent constructor's prototype. Now, when we say constructors and prototype, we're going to be making use of this term a lot, but this is how I would like you to think about it. Associate constructor to human, prototype to DNA. All right, so every constructor has a prototype object, and that prototype object is the DNA of that constructor. Okay, so if a constructor is used to construct a child or a value or another constructor, the constructor that is the child constructor would inherit from the parent constructor. Now, the inheritance happens with the DNA or via the DNA, which is the prototype. Okay, so I'm going to be saying that the child constructor's prototype inherits from the parent constructor prototype. So let's consider this code example. I'm going to create a variable called age and assign the value of 25 to it. And next, I'm going to console log age underscore proto. So I'm going to talk about what this proto property is all about later in this video, but please stay with me. So age.proto, and you get number. Okay, so if I bring you back to this diagram, you'll see that even though we have a number value here, it was created from the number constructor, or it was created by the number constructor. Okay, so every number you see in your JavaScript code is being created from this number constructor. All right, so we can decide to change this to surname. If we check surname.proto, let's see the result. We're going to see that this is string. If we go back to our diagram, you will see that the string constructor is used to create strings. If we create an array, so I'll just copy this now and say scores, change this to an array, scores. So if we check for this now, we would see that the constructor used in creating arrays is the array constructor. So you see constructor array. We can go on and check for all of them. Function, boolean, and you're going to discover that they all have a constructor that was used to construct them. All right. Each constructor has a prototype object. All right. So a value that was created by a constructor is going to inherit from the prototype object of its constructor. All right. Say hello world is constructed by string. It means that hello world would have access to properties in the prototype of the string constructor. So let's check that out. So we're going to take this back to a string and say greet hello world. Now let's check the prototype of the string constructor and see what's available to us. All right, so I'm going to check scores. So we're looking for greet. Something you need to note is when we say value.proto, what is returned to us is the prototype object of the constructor of that value. So in this case, the constructor of this value is string. All right, so when we say greet, which is this value, we're just calling the variable. All right, but greet resolves to this value. This is the same as doing this. All right, so we're asking for the prototype object of the constructor. So it's going to be the prototype object of string. That's what will be returned here. All right, now let's check that out. Let's use the variable here, greet, and check out. So the prototype object is what we see here. If I expand it, we're going to see that we have a lot of properties and methods available to us within the prototype object of the string constructor. All right, so that's where we have stuff like length, splice, split, replace, fixed, and a lot of methods that you must be very familiar with. So the reason why we could say greet.length, for instance, it is because the length property is available within the prototype object of the string constructor. So because string has length in its DNA, which is the prototype object, the child created from string has access to the length property. All right, so if I run this code, you see that we get 11 returned. There's nowhere within our code where we specified what .length is. All right, but because of the concept of prototypal inheritance, greet has access to this property that exists in the prototype object of its constructor. All right, we change this to an array of strings, say greetings, and then make use of length. You see that we get 1 returned. How come we have access to length? All right, the same rule applies. This is an array. It has a prototype object, and within its prototype object, there are a number of properties and methods that are available. Okay, any value created with this constructor will have access to those properties and methods. All right. In this case, the array of strings defined here is being generated behind the scenes with the array constructor. So therefore, it has access to the length property. All right. If we check out greetings proto, we should see those values: concat, entries, every filter, find, flat map, and the rest of them. All right. And then this is the length property. Okay. So we could use the map method on arrays because the map method is available in the prototype object of the array constructor. And this applies to every kind of value that you know in JavaScript except null and undefined. So we go back to our drawing board. This should now make more sense. At the top of the prototypal chain is what is known as object. So every constructor is a child of object. Every constructor is a child of object. And that is why you often hear that every value in JavaScript is an object. The reason for that statement is because every value, as you can see here, is constructed from a constructor who is a child of the object constructor. All right. So in JavaScript, when we say every value is an object, this is what we mean. Because if you trace up to the origin of every value, you are going to find object. So object is like the topmost ancestor, and all constructors are children of objects. And then every value that you know in JavaScript has to be created from one of these constructors. Okay, so ultimately they are all objects. All right, it's like pointing to a group of persons and say, so it's like having a family name called Johnson, and Johnson gives birth to few children: John, Joe, and Bliss. If John in turn gives birth to Samuel, and Joe gives birth to Faith, and Bliss gives birth to Esther, we can say that these are the Johnsons. All right, so saying these are the Johnsons simply means that they all belong to the family of Johnson. All right, so when we say every value in JavaScript is an object, we mean that they all inherit from objects. Okay, so that is what we mean. So basically, to summarize what we've learned, in JavaScript, every value is created from a constructor, and every constructor has an object inside of it, which is called the prototype. The prototype contains properties and methods that can be inherited by children of the constructor. So object is a constructor, and object is the parent of the array constructor. So it means that the prototype of the array constructor has access to the prototype of the object constructor. It also means that if the array constructor is used to create a value, that value would have access to the array prototype and also the object prototype. If a value is constructed using the string constructor, that value has access to the string prototype and the object prototype. If the number constructor is used to construct a value, whether explicitly or implicitly, it means that that value has access to the number prototype and the object prototype, and so on and so forth. I'm going to create an object. So the object is constructed from the object constructor. This object constructor directly is used to construct any object. So if we check, we can even do console.dir user, and then you would see that the prototype is object. All right, and if we expand this, you're going to see these methods that are available to us. All right, so this is the proto, and we'll come to proto very soon. Okay, so these are the methods that are available to us. So we're able to make use of this property simply because it exists in the prototype of the object constructor. In the next video, we're going to talk about working with prototypes in JavaScript.